Our next area of call manager troubleshooting is the server operations. And this one's pretty straightforward. You want call manager to stay online. Your servers are staying up. So that's going to be our first focus, making sure your servers stay online and troubleshooting them if they're freezing or they're crashing. Another common problem might be the call manager administration pages are not available. And that is your lifeline into the call manager portal, if you will, and all of your management functions are through those CCM admin pages. So how do we troubleshoot that and get that running? And then finally, everything seems slow, from call manager admin management to phones. When you lift up the handset, they may just have a little delayed dial tone, or when you dial, things are just not going. So how can we troubleshoot the call manager performance issues? Well, let's start off with the biggest, broadest encompassing area first, and that is making sure your servers stay online. The call managers are all server-based. They're typically running on either an HP or IBM platform that you buy from Cisco as an MCS server. So anytime you have a server in the picture, then there's all kinds of problems that can happen. You can have hard drive lock up. You can have bad memory. The motherboard can go out. Bad power supply. Bad RAID card. I got back from troubleshooting a server, and it booted up and said, "Sorry, RAID card's gone." Essentially your RAID is now dissolved because the RAID card is missing. So there's all kinds of things that that can happen in a server-based environment, and that's why redundancy is key. So you can see my list here. Server continually crashes and reboots. Call manager service freezes. Processor is pegged or memory exhausted, and that means the server is going to be paging, hitting the page file, and the symptom of that is your hard drive light is just constantly clicking when nobody's even doing anything. A lot of that is related to a memory shortage. So depending on what version of call manager you have, the troubleshooting process can vary. Call Manager 4.x, you have your Windows environment, and one of the biggest troubleshooting areas of Windows, this is a remote desktop over to a Call Manager 4x server. Let me just, my remote desktop's a little bigger. Oh, cursed auto arrange. Let me bring these all back into the picture. One of the biggest troubleshooting tools you have in Windows, well, this is Windows 2000, Call Manager 4.1, is the Event Viewer. When you open the Event Viewer, this is your lifeline as to what's going on with the server. All of the call manager issues will be reported here, either under the system log or the application log. So you want to check out both of them. Like you can see right here, I'm finding some problems with the DC directory service. You can see there's select call, socket closed, association aborted. I have no idea what's going on with the. I didn't even know if that was in the window. You can see just bad things happening with DC directory. I'm not too sure what exactly is happening, but that is where your troubleshooting begins. You can see there's some errors with the Cisco messaging interface. So you double click on that, and you can start getting a pulse for what's going on. A lot of that's an area to open a case with TAC. Most of the time, the serious issues are going to be under the system log. You can see as I scroll down, information message are good, warning messages might be bad, error messages typically are bad. So this is, in this case, server was unable to register administration tool discovery, whatever that tool may be or do. So you can see all of the different messages that we get all throughout this system, and most of the time it's just, hey, we've lost our link on our Ethernet card to the network. So all of that can be figured out just by going into the Event Viewer. Now in Call Manager 6x, and again, my goal is not to troubleshoot those individual problems, just to show you where you can troubleshoot those and gather information. In Call Manager 6x, all of that's going to be associated with the real-time monitoring tool. There is no essentially event viewer that's easily accessible on the Call Manager 6, so we go into the real-time monitor tool, and our event viewer is our syslog viewer. So you double click on that guy, choose which call manager you're looking at, in this case my CCM 6.1 server, double click system logs, and you've got your messages right here. And keep in mind, this is currently shrunk to a small window size, so it's usually a lot more readable. But it shows the machine name, what process was going on, and then you can see we've got in this case, a time slew. That's the NTP process that's setting our clock correctly. So you can see, these are all syslog, notice, info, notice, warning. So when you start seeing warning, that's, you can see current disk utilization is higher than typically recommended, send in high alarm. So same kind of thing as the event viewer, but in syslog style format. And you can see that as I go through here, there's not too much going on, but there is a lot of it. So that's where a lot of times an off-box syslog server, like that Splunk I mentioned before, to help categorize and organize these messages, might be pretty useful. So that's where we can gather our information for that. Likewise, as we start moving into call manager service freeze, processors peg, memory is overutilized, a lot of that just comes from setting a baseline. In call manager 4X, our baselines are always set in the performance monitor, which does not have a handy shortcut on the desktop. So I shoot into the administration tool, and we have this performance area right here. This is the performance monitor, similar to the real-time monitoring tool, but it allows us to add whatever counters we want to look at, and Cisco has added their own counters into this performance monitor. So I can actually click the drop down and look at the SQL database. I can look at the Cisco processes, show me the Cisco call manager, what are the currently active calls in the cluster, and I can start monitoring that as of right now. And in the background, it's starting to draw a graph showing as of right now 0 calls are actually active. Hit the plus sign, it can keep adding in things like processor time, show me what my processor utilization is for the call manager. You can see it's going to start graphing that all along. So the performance tool has been around since the dawn of Windows, and this allows you to monitor your processor, your memory utilization. If you want to go into the memory, if I can find that guy right there, and say, well, show me how many pages per second. That's a good one. The more pages you have per second, that means the more time your system was essentially out of memory and had to go to the page file on the hard drive. You can see right now pages per second is extremely low. I wouldn't normally expect it that low. It's just there's not much going on. So this is your tool to monitor all of those performance utilities, and with Call Manager 6, just as before, we have our real-time monitoring tool right here. Shooting over to the system summary screen, I immediately get a pulse for my CPU utilization, my hard drive usage, my virtual memory usage, how large or small that is. And one of the big things that you'll want to do is to set a baseline for yourself. Know what these values are normally before you can start going in and saying, well, that's abnormal. Now, one of the things that you have in the Windows version of Call Manager 4, is your Task Manager. And you've probably seen Task Manager before. It just gives you a pulse as to what your processes are that are running. It can give you a baseline on your performance. Like right now, this is just on my machine showing me I've got 2 cores on here, so it's graphing out what my CPU utilization, what my current memory is set to on this box. So I can always get a pulse as to what's going on. Well, that's a big missing piece of Call Manager 5, 6, and 7 because it's Linux-based. You can't get that immediate pulse, but they do offer some command line tools like this. Let me clear this off. I was testing it just a moment ago. Like the show stats command. I can type in show stats IO, which is kind of your input-output stats, and right up here you get a pulse as to what your average CPU utilization is. The more your percent idle is set to, the better. That's essentially how much of your processor is dedicated to an idle process, or essentially doing nothing. As you can see throughout here, I can see my current user percentages is, the users that are logged on are using about 3% utilization. The system itself is using 7% utilization. Now I can also go in and get my task manager like feel by typing in show perf, that's the performance, do a query, and show me the counters for the process, and do in quotes, and this is one you would just have to remember to, we're in Linux style syntax now. So I'm going to look at all the processes relating to their CPU time. And what it's going to do is it's going to query the server and say, what's going on right now? Give me a task manager kind of feel for all the processes that are running and how much CPU utilization they're using. So scroll up to the top, and my call manager right now is pretty idle. I can see that the RIS service is consuming 2% processor utilization. Shoot down a little bit. Right there, the Java service is consuming 1%. Right there, the RTMT, Real-Time Monitoring Tool Reporter, which is linked up to RTMT behind the scenes, is using 3%. So I can get a quick pulse. So this is great if your call manager process is freezing, things are just lagging really slow. Excuse me. You can jump onto this call manager a command line and just do a quick query and say, well, show me what is using up all of my processes on my server. Good grief. There I go, getting ahead of my slides again. I've already talked about all this stuff. It's just I had a slide for it. So how do you troubleshoot those issues? I saw the issues. I was like, let's fix it. Using Call Manager 6X. You've got the real-time monitoring tool, as you know. You can use that to check your CPU memory usage. You saw that. But one additional thing is you can check the use the control center to check the Call Manager server status. I can't emphasize it enough. When you go into the Call Manager and hit the serviceability area and log in, you've got that control center to allow you to see the status of every single service that's running, and it give you the stop, the start, the restart capability. Now, if you are constantly coming in here and seeing your Call Manager service is stopped, stop, I can tell you right there, open a attack case. It's probably a bug. It's probably something that's kicking that service offline that has been fixed in some sort of patch that's come out in the future. I've seen that a few times. That's why I brought it up as a specific thing, where if you go in there and you constantly see this is stopped, one of your servers are out of the loop. Oh, and that goes for any service. What was the one I was running into recently? It wasn't on Call Manager 6. It was Call Manager 4. DC directory service just stopped all the time. It was just like once a day the person would just have to go in and restart the service constantly because it would just stop itself. And they're like, "What is the deal?" And I said, "Well, have you called TAC?" And no. So once he called TAC, they said, "Oh yeah, we've got a patch for that. Just apply this such and such patch, and it fixes it." So that's something that does happen. I've seen it happen a few times now. That is almost always patch related. So Control Center to start and stop those services. As I said, I did get ahead of myself and cover my slides before I got to them. So let me just hit these high points so I can justify making these slides. Call Manager 4X, how do you troubleshoot performance issues? Number 1, check the Windows Event Viewer. You saw it. 2, you can use the CCM real-time monitoring tool, which it is there in Call Manager 4X. You do have the ability to go into this tool. However, it's just not as popular in Call Manager 4X because you have that performance monitor that can always check your CPU and memory usage. And being on the server using remote desktop and getting on that server itself is a lot more common in 4X than it is, of course, in 6X. So the performance tool, it's just a little smoother, a little slicker, a little easier to use in many cases, so people prefer that. And then we also have our control center. So now let's talk about an issue that directly affects your ability to manage the server. That is your CCM management not functioning. That's the CCM admin web pages. Now, these pages should be functioning all the time if the server is running. Now, keep in mind that in Call Manager 4X, you have publishers and subscribers, well, as you do in 6X, but they all run IIS. One of the common things that is suggested by Cisco's best practices is actually to stop IIS on all your subscriber servers. So it's only running on the publisher. Since changes can only be made to the publisher database in the first place, you save yourself a lot of processor utilization and security vulnerabilities on your subscribers by stopping that service altogether. So I would say, first off, make sure you're connecting to the right server and you're not mistakenly connecting to a stopped subscriber. But Call Manager management should always function. The things that can cause it not to, you can see, are all network issues, connectivity issues, such as the Call Manager not being reachable from where you are. Maybe you're connecting from the internet through a VPN and the Call Manager doesn't have the correct NAT translation to go through the VPN, or you're on a VLAN that does not have access to those Call Manager administration page. So check that out, and that goes right along with this last one, ACL blocking. It's usually best practice not to allow your users to get to the CCM web pages, even to the logon screen. So a lot of times the access list will say only these certain workstations, or only from the voice VLAN can you reach the Call Manager server. So check your access lists. Also check your name resolution. Try and go in, instead of typing in HTTP, CCM 4 dot whatever, or HTTPS, CCM 6 dot whatever, type in the IP address of the Call Manager, and then put a / CCM admin. Make sure you're going to the CCM admin pages. Call Manager 4 will just tell you it's unreachable if you forget the CCM admin. Call Manager 6 gives you a pretty screen. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. This little screen, if you type it in without the CCM admin on there, so it will redirect you to the right place. So make sure that you're using the right URL. These are obvious things. You know that. Server issues themselves, it could be utilization. It could be related to the services being stopped, like the Tomcat or IIS web service. And I mentioned that on the subscribers. So you can go in either through and you've seen the control center enough, through the control center in Call Manager 6, make sure your Tomcat web server is running. Or in Call Manager 4, you would go in through the services control panel and shoot down to Microsoft Internet Information Server, or just IIS admin. There we go. Make sure that guy has started. Again, this is the one that you would disable on your subscribers if you didn't want management to be done from those servers and save a lot of performance and security vulnerabilities. So make sure those services are started, and make sure your resource utilization is accurate, meaning you are at a average level. A lot of times if your CPU is pegged and your memory is pegged, the web page will just load and load and load and load, because it takes a lot. A lot of it's Java based. It takes a lot to get the web page out to you. And so if it loads too long, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Netscape, Netscape, who uses Netscape, would pop up and say, sorry, the page could not be displayed. Not because it wasn't going to get there, it's just taking so long to respond. It just says, I'm giving up. Finally, the server is running slow. And this could be displayed through many different things, meaning people are lifting the handset, they get a delayed dial tone. You listen for a second, it's dead, and then boom, the dial tone comes. And by the way, that delayed dial tone aspect can really kill a network, because what happens is, your server's already bogged down. People lift up the handset, they don't hear anything for 1 to 2 seconds, and they go, oh, well, what's going on? And what they'll do is hang up, lift it again, and then they'll start hitting that little dip switch on the phone. Tap, 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 kind of tapping it to see, am I getting a dial tone? And you put 50 users doing that at the same time, and your server's going to go, if it's already choked already, it's not going to be able to keep up with that even more. So always, number one thing is always check for duplex and speed mismatches. This is very common. Number one issue, and I have to admit, I was, did I mention this in this series? I might have. If I've told this story, fast forward. That's the beauty of this. See, if I was just talking to you, you'd have to listen to me tell this story all over again. But I was actually at a site setting up a voice over IP and three T1 lines bonded together for an internet connection. Let me sketch a quick diagram. 3 T1s to the internet, all bonded together. Just basic network diagram. Comes into a firewall, comes into the switch, connects to the voice over IP and internal network over here. And they were saying, the internet, we're just not getting the level of performance we thought it would be at. But they didn't complain to me for probably 2 months, because it was one big setup, and so they just said, internet seems kind of slow. So I came out and I was like, all right, well let me check. And the guy, when he had me come out, he said, oh, I called Sprint. Can I say that? Yeah, I can. I called Sprint, who was their ISP, and they said to check the speed and duplex settings. And I kind of smiled at him, because I always check that. I was like, yeah, of course, And me being the sometimes stupid technician that I am, I go, they always say that, even because we were, I was of course blaming it on Sprint. It's Sprint. They're just not doing something right. Your T1s are fine. And so, he said, Sprint said, check the speed and duplex. I said, of course they're going to say that. They're always going to try and point the finger back at us. And sure enough, I came in, and it was, where was it? It was, I think it was right here. There was a switch in between these two guys. And I first went onto the router, and I saw on the interface, the fast Ethernet interface, just a ton of input errors. And immediately I got that dropped feeling in my stomach. I'm like, no, are you kidding me? And sure enough, I came to the switch, and the switch is just shooting out console message, speed and duplex mismatch detected on this port. And I just looked at that. I was like, okay, That was the most humbling thing ever. So I had to come back to the guy. I was like, they were right. It was a speed duplex issue. Tell you what, I won't charge you for this visit. It was horrible. So anyway, I say that to say it can happen with call manager servers as well. You plug the server into the network, and it happens probably one out of every 50 devices. You'll get a speed and duplex mismatch. But when you do, you don't think to look for it, and it's just going to cause everything to run dog slow for that server. So make sure you double check the speed and duplex connection on the switch. Make sure it's correct. Check your input errors on your switch. Check for processor. We've talked about this. Make sure you have average processor utilization. Your memory leaks. Meaning, if over time you're just watching the real-time monitor and you're seeing this virtual memory usage is slowly, and this is where baseline comes in. You were at 22, now you're at 30 something. Now next week you're at 40 something, and it keeps going. Up and up and up and up higher. That tells you there's something leaking memory in that system. A reboot will fix it in the short term, but long term, you've got to figure out what's leaking. A lot less of that in Call Manager 6 and 7 and 5, and please, I'll just say 6 from here on out. Include 5 and 7 when I say that. Then you had in Call Manager 4, because Call Manager 4 was running on Windows, a fully accessible Windows operating system, non-appliance model. So it was susceptible to virus and spyware. Like, it's got a web browser, coming over here to my Call Manager server. It's got Internet Explorer right on there. And probably the worst thing you could do is start surfing the web on your Call Manager server. Just one infection of something creepy, and now your whole call manager is going to start melting before your eyes. Same thing with third-party applications. Call Manager 4.x, since it's Windows, you can install them on there, and that could lead to memory leaks or things beyond the average utilization of what you should get. You might look at the server and say, well, that server should be able to support 500 or 1,000 phones, and it's only getting 200. Before it's pegged out. Definitely check what else is installed on there that could be eating up resources. And then we could also have a potential denial of service attack on the server. Rare, especially if you've secured it properly, but it could happen. And that's where, just opening Wireshark on the server and seeing what's coming in. And if all of a sudden Wireshark explodes with, 50,000 packets a second of some mishmash that you can't tell what it is, definitely start checking out what's hitting the server. Who is that? Where's it coming from? And ironing that out. Now, if you've come from a server administration background and you've been administering Windows or Novell or Linux servers for quite some time, then you probably, in this nugget, probably saw nothing that was like, oh, that's groundbreaking, earth-shattering information that I didn't know before, because these are really just servers running Call Manager software. But it is good to go through that and say, okay, in my mind, this is the process. Remember I said when I started this series, my goal is to get those processes going in your mind to say, okay, I'm seeing this. Things are running slow. Delayed dial tone is happening. Or my call manager doesn't seem to be supporting the number of phones it should. All these things should cause little alarms. If we had syslog in our brain, little alarms to go off in our brain and go, aha, okay, I betcha we need to check out that server's resource utilization. Let's check out, using the command line on Call Manager 6 or using Task Manager on Call Manager 5. What processes are eating up space? So all of that is what we're looking at. It's essentially basic server troubleshooting when we're looking to make sure the call manager is running. So we looked at how to make sure they're staying online, making sure that our processor memory utilization is not being over consumed, making sure we're up to date with patches and the call manager service is continuing to run. Call manager administration not available. It's either network related, like DNS settings aren't correct or your IP address can't get there, or most likely the web services are stopped on the call manager, either IIS or Tomcat, depending on your version. And then finally, we just saw everything is slow. What do you do to start diagnosing that issue? Look at the performance monitor. Look at the real-time monitoring tool. Start looking for memory leaks and what other things are running. So all of those encompass to essentially encompass basic server troubleshooting to make sure your call manager server is running. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.